Nico Robin, the only member of the Strawhats to invite herself on the crew before Luffy eagerly insisted. For a long time, her intentions were a mystery and her loyalties were questionable. Nowadays, Robin has become a full-fledged member of the crew and a beloved character among the fanbase. She's smart, she's awkward, and sometimes a little scary, but underneath her personality is a woman with a lot of depth. Many people would even say that her infamous scene in Enies Lobby is one of the best in the series, and I would have to agree. There are very few moments that have that same level of emotional weight. But what exactly makes it so powerful, and how does it connect to the real world? Why is Robin so special to so many people? Join me today as I explore the tragedy, the beauty, and the essence of Nico Robin. Loneliness. It is perhaps one of the most powerful negative emotions that someone can face. With so much of our well-being coming from a sense of community or companionship, the lack of those things can leave us feeling truly empty. Our deepest need is to be seen and to be valued. So to feel unwanted can also feel like all of the color of the world has been sucked out. It can very quickly become a world not worth living. This is especially true when it's a world that you've known all your life. At 8 years old, the concept of loneliness was no stranger to Robin. She never really knew her own mother and didn't have any other family that cared about her. All of the kids of Ohara treated her like a monster because of her powers and her solitary nature. She yearned for connection. She craved acceptance. 80% of her time was dull and depressing. The only exception was when she was spending her time at the Tree of Knowledge. Thankfully, the archaeologists were fully supportive of Robin and they gave her a taste of the family that she so strongly desired. Professor Clover nurtured her as much as he could and he even encouraged her education. It's no wonder that she followed the same path. Robin's interest in archaeology likely began as a way to comfort herself in the absence of Olvia. Her books and her studies were the one thing that connected her to her mother. Even so, Robin was incredibly smart in her own right and found herself developing a genuine talent and curiosity for the subject. That, combined with the love and care from Clover and the scholars at the library, were the only things that made her days a little more bearable. Speaking of Olvia, Robin's ambitions were just as high. She didn't just want to study archaeology, she wanted to explore the mystery of the Void Century. But that was the one thing that Professor Clover could not support. He and the others refused to allow her to study the poneglyphs because of the sheer danger that comes from merely considering the idea. It's safe to say that Robin valued being included and appreciated more than a pursuit of the world's history, though. Clover's strict denial felt more like a rejection. She felt unworthy, not just as an aspiring scholar, but as a person. Aside from the scholars of Ohara, Robin had no one. It was painful for her, but she also came to embrace it. She accepted solitude and rejection as a sort of status quo, a persistent element of her existence. While she did desire friends and family, she didn't expect it. Because of how she had been treated all her life, why would anything ever be different? She did hope that one day she would go out to sea with her mother, but it's safe to say that Robin developed a sense of complacency for her neglect. It's for these reasons that Saul had such a big impact on her life and who she would become. To put it simply, Jaguar D. Saul was Robin's first real friend. He was the first person that she met on her own that didn't treat her like a monster. When he found out about her powers, he barely reacted. In fact, he saw it as a strength and even envied her. In his own way, Saul was also an outcast. He was a more peaceful giant unlike the warriors of Elbaf, and he had plenty of weird quirks of his own. The only difference was that he embraced his uniqueness, which is probably why Robin felt so comfortable around him. Robin truly had no idea how big the rest of the world was. She had no idea how many others out there had unusual powers like hers. She had no idea how many others out there would see her as a friend. The notion of a bigger world yet to be seen is a theme that comes up a lot in One Piece. With the story so heavily revolving around adventure, seeing characters explore the unknown and discover unfamiliar territory is a given. Things are rarely exactly as they seem. That doesn't mean that the world is inherently a mystery, it's simply a matter of perspective, and a huge part of One Piece is about gaining new perspective. As previously stated, Robin believed that she was destined to be alone, a perspective shaped by the world that she grew up in. Because she was so young and lacked a healthy amount of unconditional love, that belief was much more deeply ingrained. However, when she met Saul, her view of the world began to expand. She never could have conceived the thought of meeting a giant, let alone finding a friend in him as well. Saul was Robin's first glimpse into the vast world that she had yet to see for herself. A world that just might have a little more to offer her than the one she already knew. Unfortunately, she was unable to fully embrace her newfound friendship because it wasn't long before her mother returned with the Navy close on her tail. It was then that the severity of the world's history became clear to her. Amidst all the chaos and tragedy, Robin was able to share a genuine moment with Olvia. Despite the risk of becoming an enemy of the government, Robin desperately cried out for her mother to acknowledge her. Surrounded by catastrophic hopelessness, she reached out for a loving hand. There was no amount of peril that could discourage the heart of the little girl that simply wanted her family. Perhaps under better circumstances, Robin would have been able to savor the moment a little longer, but just as quickly as they were reunited, she and Olvia were soon separated yet again. Robin escaped at the cost of many lives, including Saul and her mother. As she sailed away from the flames of Ohara, she was left only with the will to finish what they started, as well as a compelling statement made by Saul just before he was frozen in ice.
No matter who you are, ain't no one born into this world to be alone!
No one is born into this world to be completely alone. In the midst of the intense pressure that was placed on Robin to carry on the pursuit of her people, Saul assured her that she would not be alone forever. He insisted that her lonesome reality would inevitably come to an end. But could it really be true? Could she really find true friends that would never leave her? Once again, Robin was abandoned. Just as her world began to open up, she lost everything, further reinforcing the idea that love and friendship could never be permanent for her. Only this time, she wasn't just left with the negative emotions that she was so used to. Saul left her with hope. Hope is a powerful thing. It won't solve your problems or cure your sadness, but it often acts as the fuel that keeps you going despite it all. Nobody really wants to give up or succumb to despair, but it's hard not to when you don't have hope. On our darkest days, the promise of tomorrow is what entices us to go at it again. The potential of another chance, another opportunity. We don't always know when or if we'll find better days ahead. In fact, we never do. It is merely the hope that we will that convinces us to see it through to the end, even when we may not want to. Without it, there is little you can do to convince someone that their suffering is worth it. Hope is usually something we hold on to without proof. We simply believe. But for some, it's impossible to do so because experience has taught them otherwise. Sometimes having hope only makes the pain that much worse when your faith is not rewarded. Robin found brief moments of security and comfort, but they were all temporary. With a bounty of nearly 80 million, she became an easy target for some and a burden for others. She went through the cycle of trust and betrayal over and over again. Before long, she lost faith in the words that echoed throughout her head day in and day out. Maybe Saul's words were an empty promise. Maybe what he said was true, but just not for her. After all, who would want to stick around the girl whose greatest sin is being alive? Robin no longer cared about finding friends. It was pointless. She chose to simply focus on finding the poneglyphs and nothing else. Then she would be able to leave her pain behind. Eventually, Robin embraced her title of Demon Child. She stopped viewing people as trustworthy and began viewing them as a means to an end. She became the cunning, smooth criminal that we were first introduced to in the Alabasta saga. She had no choice. Robin's experiences taught her that that was how the world worked. They taught her that she was wrong to hope for friends, and so she became everyone's enemy. She had the will of Ohara to keep her going, and it was strong, but time slowly chipped away at it. Before long, she not only lost the will to uncover the world's history, she lost the will to live. She wasn't weak. Robin's resolve was incredibly strong. She lived 20 years of her life on the run from the government with no one by her side, and she did so after already having suffered for most of her childhood. Most people wouldn't be able to bear that sort of pain for half that time, but even she had her breaking point. That is how imperative love and hope really are, and Robin had neither. Soon enough, she came across Luffy and his crew. Very quickly, he stood out to her as an interesting character. Her recognition of Luffy's name and its connection to her research only deepened her infatuation. Still, she ruthlessly continued with her mission until finally deciding to betray Crocodile. In her mind, preventing him from getting his hands on Pluton would be her final contribution to her people. The Alabasta poneglyph was not what she thought it would be, and she no longer had the will to keep searching, and so she made the decision to simply give in to her injuries and die. Except Luffy rejected this decision. Upon being forced to continue living, Robin was operating on a clean slate of sorts. Mentally, she was already checked out, but she felt something from Luffy and his crew that she had not felt in a long time. In spite of all that she had faced in the past 20 years, there was a part of her that still longed for Saul's words to be true. A spark of hope emerged within her, and with nothing else left to lose, she decided to give it one last shot. At first, Robin maintained her distance from the crew. She helped out when she was needed, but otherwise kept to herself. She was a member mostly by technicality, as she had not formed a strong bond with the Strawhats like they had with each other. She didn't even refer to them by their names. Obviously, none of this was because she was a truly cold individual. It was simply how she had learned to carry herself around others, so as not to get too attached. But to her fellow crewmates, Robin's demeanor was so aloof and mysterious that many of them weren't sure if they could really trust her. After all, she was previously their enemy. They did trust Luffy though, and he already knew all he needed to know about Robin. As time went on, Robin began to blend in more naturally with the Strawhats and their various antics and adventures. Before long, she found herself enjoying their company and having fun. She even rediscovered her passion for uncovering the poneglyphs, a goal that she had recently discarded. But her peace would soon be disrupted by Aokiji's intervention. Robin was reminded of the massive target on her back, and the Strawhats were reminded that they still barely knew her. Placed under pressure and set against impossible odds, the crew made a decision to follow Luffy's lead and fight for Robin anyway. Robin was touched by their devotion despite the circumstances. She was beginning to see the crew as true friends. However, her views toward herself had not changed. Her old wounds remained, and she still believed herself to be a burden. Even though the Strawhats displayed loyalty in the face of danger, she did not expect it to last. Because she still considered herself to be someone unfit to form permanent connections and unworthy to live, betrayal was an inevitability in her mind. When confronted by CP9, her instincts kicked in. Rather than letting her conflict be forced upon the Strawhats, she decided to leave them behind so that they could be spared the weight of her trauma. Her life became a small price to pay for the only people she had become close to in 2 decades. Of course, Robin failed to realize the magnitude of their loyalty and determination. Luffy and the others literally became the first people to storm Enies Lobby since its creation. When confronted with the reality of Robin's situation, they did not waver. They shot right through their flag, simultaneously declaring war, and not one of them flinched. Luffy may seem like he's oblivious to the government's oppression, and that's somewhat true. He doesn't know the scale of their crimes and definitely doesn't understand the complexity of their politics. But he is completely aware of what they stand for, and despite not knowing the details of Robin's history with them, he knew they were her enemy. He and the rest of the crew did not care. They gladly made the government their enemy as well because Robin was their friend. They refused to let her sail alone. At that moment, Robin knew for certain that Saul's words were true. She realized that she had found the family that she'd always dreamed of. All of her despair was shattered in an instant. Overcome with emotion, the voice of her soul cried out her deepest desire.
I want to live! Take me with you! Take me away from here!
Loneliness is one of the most dangerous feelings a person can experience. Without a sense of belonging or security, the world is a dark place. When you experience a lack of affection for long enough, you'll probably start to believe that you're the problem. You might believe that loneliness is your destiny and that life isn't worth living at all. That's understandable. A person can only take so much disappointment and sorrow before they lose all hope. Without hope, even the strongest resolve will fade over time. This world is filled with situations that will rip any hope you have straight out of your hands. People are cruel, unforgiving, and selfish. But the world is also a big place, and there are many types of people out there. If you simply exist, then you are not only worthy of friendship, you are guaranteed it. As long as you are searching, loneliness will always expire. No matter where you come from, no matter what you've experienced, and no matter who you are, no one is born into this world to be alone. That is what Nico Robin's character is all about. That is what makes her special. That is the promise of existence.